Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Friday, which means it's time for a new how to bass tutorial. And today I'm going to show you how to make this sound. So this got a little away from me, but it started out pretty basic actually, and I wanted to bring attention to a particular facet of Maximus that I talk about kind of a lot whenever I'm mentioning the Waveshaper. I'm not actually using the Waveshaper right now, but you might notice if you've ever seen the Waveshaper and Maximus that they have somewhat of a similar interface. That the Waveshaper's graph and how it works out was very similar to how the Maximus's graph works out. As it turns out, the way that the Waveshaper works, the way that Maximus works, is very similar. The primary difference between how Maximus works and the Waveshaper works is that the Maximus has time variables, things like attack and release, and what's actually called sustain in the new version of FL. I'm still not using it. At least, actually, I am still using it. I have 5 different installs of FL. Don't worry about it. The point being is that these time variables prevent distortion. They exist to allow the change in the transfer curve to be solicited only onto the transients of things, not to be so fast as to actually change the wave shape of individual cycles. But if you turn them all off, all of these things off, which do go all the way off, it goes all the way down to 0 milliseconds, then you get a wave shaper. And Maximus is a multi-band compressor, which means that now this is a multi-band wave shaper. And then also I'm just limiting it with more distortion on top. So like it's super duper tight. Like what things I'm doing here look pretty random, and it's because they're pretty random. And like I just kind of fiddle with it until it sounded all right. But the basic idea is that I wanted to do wave shaping, but I wanted to do multi-band wave shaping, and you could do that with Maximus. The starting sound here is a harmor, because I decided that what I wanted to do was that I was going to do this multi-band Maximus thing, and then I was going to do acid, not the drug, the genre, and I was going to have a low-pass filter with harmor and that kind of thing. But what ended up happening is that I'm using harmor and I'm using an actual low-pass filter in post, and you might be wondering why the hell I'm doing that when I could just use a low-pass filter here. Like, what's the difference? What's the change? And there is a change as it happens. The way that the low pass filter works inside harmor is that it's not really a filter. What it's doing is that it's just telling individual harmonics to be on or off depending on like its position in time. Each individual harmonic is its own separate oscillator being controlled by the myriad controls available to you in the additive to this section of harmor, which is this whole top half here. And plus a bunch of settings and the resynthesis. All this has to do with what additive to this is as a whole, which is that everything is being built by individual oscillators that are playing single harmonic sine waves, adding up to be whatever other kind of wave we want. In this case, it's a saw wave, and a saw wave looks like this harmonically. So when a filter comes in and tells it to turn off, if we just follow one individual harmonic, we can see, okay, cool, it's on, it's on, it's on. Now it's off, now it's on again. And like that's all of this harmonic. It has no interaction whatsoever with the previous harmonics or any kind of information they're in. So, and then you play them all together, and you get what sounds an awful lot like a filter. However, like I said, it's not really a real filter, and other than cosmetically, there is actually quite an important difference between what's happening here and what's going on here. You may have heard the term before, linear phase EQ. Linear phase EQ or linear phase filters are basically the answer to how regular filters are accomplished. Regular filters that happen in more or less real time do so through phase modulation. Actually, you can see this if you look inside Serum, if you're a Serum user. Like in the filter, when you have the filter, if you click on the interface, it actually shows you the phase. This is what it's doing to the phases of whatever frequencies are around the cutoff point in the filter to create essentially interfrequency phase cancellation. So that means that the way that it's making this shape is that it's utilizing phase modulation and individual harmonics to frequency ranges anyway. And that's the kind of the point is that like when you're using a real filter, it's doing it as at a range of frequencies and it's altering its phase while it's doing that. Because if you've ever like moved a filter really fast and you thought that it kind of changed the pitch of whatever you're doing, it's because it is. When you change the phase of something while it's playing, you change its pitch. It's actually how regular digital FM works. Things like Citrus, FM8, Serum, Toxic Biohazard, the modulation oscillator inside Massive, all those things are phase modulation, which it presents as pitch modulation. That's how FM works. And it's also what happens when we use a real filter. As a result, the traditional kind of acid sound that we're used to is a result of moving a real filter around that does real damage to the phase linearity of all the things. And that's where linear phase filters come into play. And Harmor, as a result of the individual harmonics just turning on or off and having nothing to do with any kind of phase change, is by default linear phase. And that's kind of a neat thing, just because actual linear phase filters and EQs actually introduce quite a lot of latency in order to process the phases to remain where they are. And that's why we don't really use them all the time, is because regular EQs are just fine, especially if you're not moving anything. But even then, regular filters are also just fine. But a lot of that also has to do with the fact that as people who have been listening to electronic music since, filters were a thing, we are used to what a real filter sounds like. We are used to what phase change sounds like to things. And that means that like we have to, like, if we want that kind of acid sound, then we gotta go with that. So that's why I use this filter. As you can tell, the actual sound that came out of this has nothing to do with acid, but that's because I kind of just went places with it. I have a little bit of unison on, I have a little bit of prism on, and in the prism, I'm actually doing something. I've changed the graphic how to be this. And initially what I was going to do is that I wasn't going to use it in unison because I wanted to keep it mono, but then I didn't want to keep mono, so I used unison. But I didn't mess around with anything past in the unison. Like, this is really still a very basic kind of saw wavy thing, but it's the unison of this unique waveform that's now being created by the change in prism, which is kind of interesting. This changing the pitch of these particular harmonics so that, like, they're phase canceling against other harmonics. I made a video about it. I made a video called Interharmonic Phase Cancellation if you want more information on that, because it's a lot, and I already spieled a whole bunch about some stuff and don't necessarily need to talk about it anymore. Yeah. So that's what this guy's doing. Good job clipping. And then the next thing in line is volume automation, but that actually isn't the first thing that happened. So the first thing that happened was this Maximus, which is just doing the distorting. Good God. Now you hear how that sounds way messier, like the way that it is now than it did when it was over, other than the vocoder that's on there later. A big part of it is the fact that there's volume modulation before the distortion. Like right there is a pretty good example of what this is doing. Without it, with it. Yeah. So, like the wave shaper, how much of this shape the volume is applied to the sound has to do with how loud the sound is. As you can see here, as it moves all the way up here, it moves through all this stuff. Now, if I turn that down, it moves through less of the stuff and thus distorts less. So this means that we actually do have control in real time over the intensity of distortion over particular moments of modulation. Most of the time, I'm fine with just slapping distortion onto something and then having it be just there for forever. But this particular kind of distortion is extremely busy, which means that it's going to get gross when it's not perfectly doing what we want to do all the time. And that makes modulation kind of difficult. So that's why I have that volume automation layer there. I probably could have gotten away with this if I had macro, like if I thought I had time and macro this with an envelope controller so that like all the articulators just one modulation motion, and I could just link it all together, link the ranges together, that's fine. But there are actually more interesting things that have occurred because this volume automation is separated from the actual modulation. We'll talk about that when we get to the other parts. Next up is an EQ, which is doing mostly just a big EQ. And then the vocoder comes in. Lots of options here, and I really haven't. Every time I move this knob, it sounds better. Anyway, this is just Vocodex. You've seen me use this a lot. I'm sure plenty of you are thinking, more Harmor and Vocodex. Yeah, well, whatever. When it stops making interesting sounds, I'll stop using it. But when you're using a vocoder, the way the vocoder tends to work is that you have a carrier and a modulator, like two different actual signals. But when you only put one signal through it, it'll use, at least Vocodex, it'll use the signal to be its own carrier and its own modulator. So that's what's happening right now, which is that the vaguely vocal sounds of itself are modulating itself according to the pitch shift we have here, which I'm also screwing around with in here, which changes the pitch value, which is really just a formant control that controls the impact of the harmonics at like what part in the spectrum is it. So like look at the behavior, and like we see that it's impact there. We move the pitch down and moves the whole thing down because it's reporting the pitch activity as being lower or higher, like it would be if it were pitched higher or lower. So this is doing that per harmonic, which is a bit weird. And this is the bandwidth control, which is this guy here. There's always a happy medium to be had with this kind of thing. That's kind of hard to do when they're all the same width. What this does is this graph allows you to change the width on a per band basis. That's why we have thicker ones here and thinner ones there, which allowed me to more carefully tailor the sound to what it's supposed to be like. Which is kind of just whatever. 56 bands, still order 2. Not much else changed. And last but not least, an EQ. And then bring the volume back up. So now we can talk about why this volume automation is important. And it's actually right here, this last thing that happens is kind of funny. We hear this whip that begins before the volume automation further articulates. So we actually get this sort of double whip thing here, but only one whip in terms of modulation, and then another whip that's actually volume. So it's 2 different kinds of whips, and it comes together interestingly. This is the pitch modulation from the vocoder. So what we see here is that like sometimes some of that mess actually sounds pretty good, especially when it's like it's in our control. If it's not, like this is true for most kinds of effects. You might have noticed this yourself, where like if you use basic forms of things like chorus or flanger, if you hear it happening the whole time on a sound, like one whole very long phrase, and like it's on the same sound the whole time, and you hear a very slow, regular like LFO modulation on that kind of sound, it gets like it sounds too obvious. It feels just like obvious. And so this big mess that's happening here, which is happening the whole time, like, but it gets cut off here. So when it comes in, it feels like like a different modulation source now. It feels like a different kind of accent that this sound could have versus just a pile of noise that we're just trying to hide. That's sort of the value of this volume thing here. It really brings out a lot of the stuff. Like even without it, like without it is what this all sounds like. It ain't bad, but that mess just kind of grates on me. So like we're able to sort of be very targeted about it, which I kind of like. I like that whole business. Yeah, so that's this sound. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all the good stuff. This FLP will be available for download in the description of this video. And yeah, you guys have a nice day.